Good evening. Our speaker tonight is Brian Zink. A Kansas native, Brian has steadily worked his way west. Brian earned his baccalaureate in science in wildlife, fisheries, and conservation biology at Kansas State University. He then went on to earn his master's degree in biology at Fort Hays State University in Kansas. Brian started his biologist career with the Wyoming Game and Fish Department. He monitored bats, spotted skunks, secretive marsh birds, great gray boreal owls, and the endangered black-footed ferret. Next stop, Eastern Washington, where Brian worked with the Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife on the recovery and reintroduction of the Columbia pygmy rabbit. Brian is passionate about conservation and environmental education. He has served in leadership positions at local, state, and national levels with nonprofit groups such as the Wildlife Society and the American Society of Mammalogists. In 2019, Brian became the executive director of Pilchuck Audubon. Brian lives in Mount Vernon with his wife and his very young son. In his free time, he enjoys gardening, photography, backpacking, and birding. Welcome, Brian.
Unmute myself here, and then I will get started. Thank you for that introduction. Yeah, thank you all for joining us tonight. I'm excited to talk to you about lights out for birds, how we can help birds during their migratory path by reducing light pollution. And so birds evolved to navigate in a world that looked like this, with open landscapes, quiet environments, and bright stars. But in the last 150 years, we've turned our landscapes into brightly lit cities where the moon and stars are swallowed by the artificial light that permeates upwards. And this is devastating for birds because, like a moth to flame, birds are drawn to this artificial light, and the results are dire. This image here is just a sampling of the birds that were collected after colliding with buildings in Washington, D.C. in 2012. And I just want to be clear that this isn't a fluke. It's not a one-time occurrence. October 2020, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, more than 1,000 migrating songbirds collided with buildings within a small area of downtown Philadelphia, killing hundreds of small birds such as warblers. And the birds in this photo are just a fraction of what was collected on the ground by a volunteer that morning. May 2017, Galveston, Texas, nearly 400 dead birds from building collisions. And October 2023, Chicago, Illinois, nearly 1,000 dead birds from one building. Overall, building collisions kill an estimated 365 to 988 million birds each year. And that's just in the United States. Building collisions is one of the leading causes of bird mortality in our developed world. So why are birds so vulnerable to nighttime light? Well, most of our birds actually migrate at night. About 80% of our terrestrial birds do. If you live in the north part of Western Washington, Skagit Valleys, parts of Snohomish, Whatcom, you've probably heard the snow geese and the trumpeter swans flying overhead after dark. Birds use the stars and the moon to help them navigate at night, and this helps them orient north and south. Birds migrate twice a year. Most species go north and south, and they do this twice a year. So they have to navigate this gauntlet of light pollution, not just once, but twice. And they didn't evolve with light pollution or artificial light at night. And this is a new facet of their environment that they haven't adapted to yet. Artificial light at night, the acronym is ALAN. In other words, that's light pollution, as I'll reference it throughout tonight. And the definition of light pollution is the human-made alteration of outdoor light levels from those that are naturally occurring. And there are a few different components of light pollution that I'll cover here. So the highlighted area on this graphic, this is the area of useful light. So this is where we want the light to be. This is why we put the light there. This line shows glare, and glare is excessive brightness that causes visual discomfort. Most of us are familiar with glare from driving at night. So the headlights from oncoming traffic shine in our eyes. That's glare. Sky glow is the brightening of night sky over inhabited areas. This is what we typically think of when we think of light pollution. So light going up into the sky. And then there's light trespass. This is light falling where it's not intended or needed. And so in our graphic here, that light is going across the property line and shining on the neighbor's house. That's light that's not useful. It's not where we intended it to be. And then the fourth component that I don't have on this graphic is clutter. This is bright, confusing, and excessive groupings of light sources. When I think about clutter, I think of Times Square. So just lots of different lights doing all sorts of different things all at once. So what causes light pollution? Well, first off, we have unshielded lights. So the street lights in this image, they do direct light towards the ground, but you'll notice that they also shoot light in every direction possible, sideways and straight up. And so these are a big cause of light pollution because the light goes directly into the night sky. All night lighting. So we've all seen empty parking lots with lights that are doing nothing. This is light that's bouncing off the ground, going back up into the sky as well. Decorative lighting that has no functional purpose. So the house in the image here, I counted it earlier. I forget how many lights, like 12 or 13 different lights. That's excessive. We don't need 4 lights on the upstairs windows. A few lights here along the pathway in front of the garage would be plenty to safely and adequately light this space. So excessive decorative lighting. And then glass buildings. The light inside is fine, but there's nothing to keep that light inside the building. It just permeates that glass exterior. And so light itself isn't really a problem. It's how we've designed and deployed it in our built environments that is the issue. And so this is an image of Washington at night and all the light pollution that we are expelling into the night sky. Now, while we clearly have some really terrible areas in terms of light pollution, such as kind of that Olympia, Tacoma, Seattle, Everett corridor, even Spokane now, we do have some really dark areas nearby, such as North Cascades National Park, Olympic National Park, and their associated national forests. If we zoom into Snohomish, Keene, Skagit, and Island counties, you might be able to see where you live on this map. But we can also start to see more of those localized hotspots for light pollution. The I-5 corridor seems to be pretty bright from Tacoma up towards Everett, but there are varying degrees of light pollution here. This image is another way of looking at the same data. This map is the Bortle dark sky scale, which rates the observability of celestial objects taking into account light pollution. And the scale runs from 1 to 9, with 9 being the highest level of light pollution. And on this map, white is the highest level of light pollution. And so you'll notice that the I-5 corridor through Seattle and southward is white, but also just east of there in Bellevue is also white. And then there's one spot up north near Mukilteo, kind of an outlier, but that is where Payne Field is. That is Boeing. That's causing that light pollution there. So we know that birds are vulnerable to nighttime lights, but how does this cause mortalities? Well, birds use the light from the sun and the moon and stars as navigational cues, and artificial light interferes with those natural light sources, which confuses the birds. And this causes them to fly towards those lights and become disoriented. birds can't see glass. It's another thing they didn't evolve with. And so as they're flying towards those artificial lights, they smack right into clear glass windows. But not all birds run into windows. Many birds get so disoriented that they simply fly in circles and exhaust themselves over the course of the night. This causes them to either die of pure exhaustion and lack of energy stores, or it causes them to be very easy prey for predators. So they may survive the night, and when the sun comes up, they find some place to land and rest. But because they're so tired, they're unable to be as vigilant or unable to simply escape from a predator. And so, what if I told you the solution was as easy as flipping the switch? Audubon, Audubon's Lights Out program is what I'm talking about tonight. And the whole strategy of this Lights Out program is that by convincing building owners and managers to turn off excess lighting during the months migrating birds are flying overhead, we help provide them safe passage between their nesting and wintering grounds. And this program has had a long, kind of a slow buildup, but has gained momentum in recent years. Toronto, Canada was the first city in the world to address urban bird collisions back in 1993. Chicago was the first US city to follow suit in 1999. And today it has spread across the country. There are over 50 cities with Lights Out programs now, 6 statewide programs, and 1 regional program covering 4 states in the Midwest. And we've already seen major success in many of these places. One example is Chicago. Within the first 5 years of its Lights Out program, all of the city's buildings over 60 stories tall were turning their lights off for birds during migration. Another example is New York City. You might be familiar with the September 11th tribute light, which is shown here. This light shines each year on September 11th to honor those lost in 2001. But this light has been an issue for birds. You might be able to see it in this picture here, but there are some birds flying around in those lights. And it got to be such an issue that they actually did a scientific study on it. Researchers monitored the birds in these lights on September 11th for 7 years and compared that to the surrounding bird communities. And what they found is that these lights influenced 1.1 million birds up to 2.5 miles in altitude. In other words, that's 8 Empire State Buildings tall that birds were being affected by these tribute lights. And when the installation was illuminated, birds aggregated in high densities, they decreased their flight speeds, they followed circular flight paths, and they vocalized frequently. And simulations revealed a high probability of disorientation and subsequent attraction for birds nearby. And bird densities near the installation exceeded magnitudes 20 times greater than the surrounding areas. So they were drawing birds into these lights from very far away. But they had a great, simple solution for this. They turned off the lights to allow the birds to disperse and return to normal behavior. The local Audubon in New York City worked with the operators of this light to do this. So they have volunteers that watch for birds on September 11th every year, let them know when there's a lot in there, and then they shut the light down for 20, 30 minutes until the birds disperse, and then they turn the light back on. So a really simple solution and just a great collaboration and partnership between Audubon and the city of New York. So what specific actions do Lights Out programs advocate for? There's several I'm going to talk about, but before I go through each one, I want to mention that there is a seasonal focus to this. We want to prioritize migration prioritize the migration periods, which is in Washington, which is about April 1st to May 31st in the spring, and then the fall is about September 1st to October 31st. And so ways you can help or ways we want to focus on Lights Out is to turn off lights in your home and business before leaving, and advocate for turning lights off in your office building if you work in a tall building or any sort of office building that leaves lights on all night. Looking at the middle image here, turn off or shade lobby, atrium, and greenhouse lights, especially if those are in spaces with vegetation behind the glass, because it looks like habitat to birds. And turn off landscape and outdoor lighting. Um, ensure ensure that the fixtures that must stay on are aimed downward and shielded. So you can have outdoor lighting, but try and minimize it so we don't have an excess of light. In addition to turning off or removing lights, we can also control the light that we do need. And this entails focusing the light where we need it and choosing the right kind of light. We want to draw blinds, curtains, or shades at night in all lighted areas and rooms to prevent light from escaping to the outside. Where possible, we want to install motion sensors or timers to control and minimize light use. And we want to use warm colored light bulbs with lower lumens. Aim for a color temperature of around 2100 to 2200 Kelvin. And there are three additional aspects of the Lights Out program and window collisions in general that I want to cover. These are bird-friendly lighting, bird-friendly windows, and bird-friendly landscape design. First one is bird-friendly lighting. It's estimated that 20 to 50% of outdoor residential lighting goes straight up into the sky, serving no purpose whatsoever. So to fix this, we want to use bird-friendly light fixtures. And what I mean by that is these are light fixtures that point the light down towards the ground, where we need it and nowhere else. And so here's an example of um, different types of lights with the worst on the left getting better as we move right in this graphic. So the first one is kind of like those street lights I showed you earlier, just shoots light in all directions, very indiscriminate. And as we work our way towards the right, um, we put a shield or a cover on the light to direct the light towards the ground. And on the far right, the best case scenario is we have a shielded light, but it also has a timer or motion sensor as well. And so here's an example of this in practice. This is a car repair shop that replaced its one unshielded light fixture with two dark side friendly light, minimizing the light pollution on the surrounding trees and focusing the light on the ground where it was needed. So the left is the before image and the right is the after image. And so on the left, you can see that the area right next to the building has no light on it at all, essentially. And that's where you would want the light. So you can see uh, the light is actually going up into the trees mostly. But on the right, with the dark sky friendly or bird friendly lighting, the building itself is lit up now and the trees are much darker. So that's kind of what we're looking for on a retrofit of a current light fixture. The next aspect is bird-friendly windows. Birds don't just hit windows at night. A lot of them also collide with windows during the day because the reflections in the windows look like habitat and confuse them. And so these are a few of the treatment options you can apply to your windows to help make the glass visible to birds. The first is window screens. So a lot of windows already have these, but they only cover half the window a lot of times. And so you could add screens to the other portion of the window. This is a very affordable, cheap option as well. Uh, in the middle, we have paracord. These are often referred to as Zen blinds or something along those lines. Basically, just paracord that's hanging vertical in front of your window, spaced about 4 inches apart. And on the right, we have markers or film. This is what we're seeing more commonly in some of our commercial buildings, but it's basically a grid pattern of dots that spaced about 2 inches apart. And the purpose of these is to break up the reflection in the window. And I do want to acknowledge that while it's great to add all of these to your windows, we understand there may be a financial barrier to that. So if that's the case for you, we recommend focusing on any problem windows first, meaning any windows that you've already noticed birds hitting or would expect them to hit based on the habitat or whatnot in your space. And so the most important thing is you want to put the treatments on the outside of the glass. It has to be the outside of the window in order to break up the reflection of the trees, the sky, and anything else that looks inviting to a bird. If you put these on the inside of the window, it won't do a thing. Markers must be no more than 2 inches apart and cover the entire surface of the window. A few decals on a large window will not prevent birds from colliding with that window. If you use just one or a few stickers or the markers are spaced too far apart, birds will actually try and fly through those gaps the way they fly through gaps in a tree canopy. If you're doing the hanging paracord, that can be spaced a little bit farther apart, 3 to 4 inches, and that's based on the movement and reflection and motion that those paracords provide. And there's been some research on this, so these numbers, the 2 inches, the 4 inches. There's research behind that, and those very specific guidelines out there. I also want to mention if you can't permanently alter your windows, maybe you rent, um, maybe you are have too many windows to afford one of the other treatments. Um, Tempera paint or paint markers are a really great solution, and they're very affordable. They're one of the cheaper options as well. So this is a great option if you rent or you plan on moving soon, because these are easily removable and your landlord won't be mad about it. The third aspect is bird-friendly landscape design. Uh, Bird feeders aren't really landscape design, but I want to throw that in here because for many of us, it does factor into the landscape in our yards or our spaces. There are some guidelines on where to put your bird feeders to help reduce window collisions. So you either want to have your bird feeder very close to the window within 3 feet or very far from the window, meaning 30 feet or farther away. There's some research backing this up, but the logic behind it is if the bird feeder is very close to the window and something spooks the bird, it's not going to have enough runway or time to build up a lot of speed and hit the window hard. So it may hit the window, but it'll hit it at a very soft, slow speed, and it won't injure it as badly. Again, if the bird feeder is 30 feet away and the bird gets spooked, it has time to change directions and divert and not go directly into the window. If you have plants indoors, I know they need light, but if we can move them away from windows, that helps. Birds will see the plants in windows, think it's habitat, and they can land on it. So try and hide your plants a little bit from the outside if you can. And then same as the bird feeders, if you have native vegetation or fruiting vegetation that attracts birds, you want to be careful about how close you put that to your window. We want to kind of follow that 3 foot or 30-foot rule that we talked about with bird feeders. Another one is avoid creating tunnels in our landscaping. So this picture on the left, that walkway, nice vegetated walkway leads right into some windows on that building. That can be a problem. In the middle image, we want to avoid placing landscape edges or green roofs or walls directly adjacent to glass. This isn't a problem for most of our residential homes, but if you have a green roof right next to windows, birds can easily mistake that and fly into the window. And on the right, we want to avoid creating landscaped courtyards with untreated glass. So this area here could be a disaster for birds with all that green vegetation and windows on at least 2 sides, maybe 3 sides here. So if those windows are untreated with any sort of bird deterrent, this is a really awful spot for birds to be because they can get trapped quite easily. But I also want to step back and think about how the issue of light pollution isn't just about birds. It's more than just birds. 80% of the world's population lives under sky glow. In the United States and Europe, 99% of the public can't even experience a natural night. This image is of the Bellingham waterfront. One thing we kind of forget about is how water reflects light. And so Even when we shine light down, it can still be reflected back up. And it affects other species of wildlife besides birds. Artificial lights can actually lead baby sea turtles to their demise. Sea turtles, when they're hatched on the beaches, they orient themselves to the ocean by the sunlight on the horizon. Um, but human-made artificial light can confuse them which direction that is, and so they can actually go inland instead of towards the ocean. Frogs and amphibians also have impacts, so they reduce their calling and reproduction. They have behavioral alterations. They avoid otherwise good habitat because the artificial light um, deters them from it. They have developmental delays, so they may stay tadpoles longer, which makes them more likely to be predated at the juvenile stage, and so on. The list you can go through a list for all sorts of species and find different ways that light pollution is affecting them in a negative way. And I like this quote from Chad Moore, who was a former U.S. National Park Service employee. He says, "When we add light to the environment, that has the potential to disrupt habitat, just like running a bulldozer over the landscape can." And so we have to view light as a powerful kind of pollution, right up there with air and water pollution. And if the baby sea turtles and frogs don't pull on your heartstrings, maybe I can convince you through your pocketbook. Uh, Estimated that at least 30% of all outdoor lighting in the US is wasted, mostly by lights that aren't shielded. And that adds up to $3.3 billion of wasted energy each year and the release of 21 million tons of carbon dioxide. To offset all of that wasted carbon dioxide, we'd have to plant 875 million trees annually. And again, it's more than just birds. There's a lot going on in this graphic, but the main thing I want you to know this is in that pie chart, lighting accounts for 43% of office building energy consumption. So one of the ways we can try and convince building owners, building managers to buy into lights out is that it will help their bottom line. 43% of their costs go towards energy expenses. I also want to mention that one of the common concerns I get when giving talks about this is people feel like if we take away the lights, spaces will become less safe. There's actually starting to be some research out there that says this isn't always or isn't necessarily true most of the time. Um, and so this is one example. This is a pot light on the garage. Looking at this, you feel like it's a pretty well lit area. Looks pretty safe, right? Well, actually, if you take your hand and cover the light and block the glare from hitting your eyes, there's been a person standing there in the shadows the whole time. So having more lights doesn't necessarily make you safe. In some instances, it makes you less safe. So we want to focus on not having more light, but better light. And so how can we make the difference here in Washington? Well, Audubon, Washington, actually had legislation earlier this year um, for lights out and bird friendly buildings. Um, this was focused on reducing nighttime light to protect birds, cut energy, lower energy use, cut emissions, and preserve dark skies. This did not make it through the legislative session this year. That often happens with some of our priorities. It takes a few years to get those across the finish line. So hopefully this will be back again future legislative sessions. And if it is, we'd love to have your support with that. If you are local to Snohomish County and Tomato Island, where Pilchuck Audubon serves, we'd love to have your help developing a lights out program locally through our conservation committee. So if you're interested in volunteering on that with us, we'd really love to have your help with that. In Audubon, Washington, I have a couple of QR codes here. They have a lights out pledge you can take. It's a quick form saying you pledge to do lights out, and they'll provide you with some resources. And they also just added a new lights out page to their website, focused on Washington specifically. And it has a list of nice resources, such as sample letters that you can write to building owners to talk to them about how they can reduce their lighting at night and things like that, and how you can do it at home as well. So a lot of things I talked about tonight. And so I believe this is my last slide, and so I will leave this up in case anybody wants to um, click on those QR codes or scan them. I'd be happy to take any questions if there are any.
Excellent. As always, it's an important but uncomfortable topic, and I know everyone out there has, in one way or another, had, thank you, Matt, had some experience with a bird strike. Maybe not something that they could do anything, but maybe even their neighbor's bird. But it's always an opportunity to do some teaching. Folks, if you've got some questions, feel free to put them in the chat. Equally so, if you prefer talking rather than typing, you can unmute. I have one here from Donna. I think this is a suggestion. How about a big TV campaign, a public service announcement, educating people about this? I think if more people knew about the number of birds dying and getting lost, some of these people might take action.
Yeah, that's a great idea, great point. Audubon, Washington. If you're not familiar with the Audubon structure, there are 25 chapters in Washington State, each with their own geographic area that they serve. Pilchuck Audubon serves Snohomish County and Camano Island. But there's also a state office of Audubon, called Audubon, Washington. And they work more on the legislative side of things, the higher policy type level stuff. And they made lights out a priority last year. So this year is the second year that lights out has been a priority for the state office here. And so we're starting to implement some of these things. The brand new Audubon lights out page for Washington is part of that. There's some new resources out. But we're just starting to do that campaign here in Washington. And so you're absolutely right. Getting the word out is the biggest thing we can do, which is why I'm here talking tonight. And I do this talk for a couple other organizations throughout the year this year. But yeah, education is the biggest thing. And so the way you can help us is by telling your friends, spread the word, share the website links and things like that as far and wide as you can.
Well, this is certainly a great opportunity for people of like minds to put their heads together. But in a way, you're preaching to the choir, as the saying goes. Um, on that wonderful map that you showed briefly of cities that have had some success with lights out programs, I think the Chicago area was, I mean, the Midwest was about as far west as it goes. Do you have a theory of why we don't seem to have quite these dramatic things? I mean, we're a flyway. Maybe we don't build on the scale of the McCormick Center, which is the place that killed 1 million birds in one night. Anything you might theorize, Brian? Or do you agree that we don't have that kind of mass effect that's occurring? It's partly because we don't have those kinds of size cities, I guess, huh?
Yeah, that would kind of be what I would venture is that the eastern half of the U.S. just has way more of a dense population than we have in the western U.S. When you think about states like Utah and Nevada and things like that, they have more cities, larger cities, more skyscrapers, less natural habitat because of all the development in the eastern U.S. over the years. So I think that probably plays a large part in it. Um, and it's kind of every part of the country kind of has its own focus, and maybe they just kind of focused on it earlier than we did. We're catching up, but yeah, I don't have a definitive answer on that. But you're right. Most of the chapters or program lights out programs were in the eastern, central or eastern U.S. currently.
I mean, I bet a number of you saw it too. The amazing and dramatic effect when they turned off that 9/11 light and all those birds dissipated. If you knew that was happening in your backyard, you might be more moved to do something. But again, it's a scale thing. Let me read. One of our members has written her neighbors wouldn't even turn off their all-night lights when some of us were trying to see the auroras last year, which thought might mean more to them than the birds, but no. And in like mind, do you have suggestions regarding how to talk to neighbors about this? I can talk to my neighbor that I know, but I'm uncomfortable approaching folks that I don't really know living down the block or businesses. I mean, that bigger aspect of there being some incentive to businesses is one that I'd love to hear you address if you can too, Brian.
Yeah, neighbors is a hard one. Everybody has their own priorities. And it's you want to keep those friendly relationships with your neighbors as well. Um, the best thing I would recommend is just kind of share the information with them. Let them know that if you did something at your house, talk to them about that. Hey, like, hey, I did this at our house. The birds are migrating through, or something like that. Um, Tell them that the cost of energy, like the lights at night, will save them a lot of money, but especially with energy prices going up every year.
Don't go as far as finding a bird strike bird and leaving it on their
Yeah,
front door. No, don't do that.
no, planting dead birds. And as far as buildings, this one I would recommend kind of if you can work with like a local organization like Audubon chapter or WOS or some other group, because you can get a little bit more clout in that than just somebody coming off the street probably. And we should be able to come up with some resources um, to help guide that conversation or educate those building owners. Uh, on the Audubon Washington Lights Out page, there's actually a couple form letters you can look at, and one of them is for building owners or managers. So kind of a template of how to start that conversation with somebody who owns a building that leaves their lights on all night. Uh, but yeah, we're currently developing some of these resources for our local constituents.
Uh-huh, uh-huh. Brian, let me put you on unsteady waters, maybe. How much success has there been with mitigating light issues for seabirds like marbled murrelets or nesting shearwaters and petrels in Hawaii? Do you know anything about that sort of thing?
I don't know about the local species or Hawaii even, but I would like to direct you to one of our speakers. I believe it was our February monthly program for Pilchuck Audubon was Peter Hodum. Um, he does research down in Chile on seabirds, and they actually dealt with light pollution on the islands off the coast of Chile. Um, and they had success with that. They were building a highway right where I forget what the specific species was that they were working with, what seabird species. But they put a highway in with all sorts of bright lights, and the local community was upset about it because they were finding so many dead birds or injured birds from these lights. And so they've had success down there doing it. He's a local researcher. I
Now,
forget what
Peter, yeah,
university is with down in Tacoma.
University of Puget Sound. Yeah,
Yes, thank
that's
you.
right.
That recording is actually, or that talk is recorded on our website, so that you can go back and watch that if you're interested. But they have had success with mitigating light on islands, at least for seabirds. I do know that.
One of our uh, listeners has come to the more local target again. It seems like a good place to start is to get nature centers to install bird-safe glass markings. A lot of people see the hawk silhouettes that are commonly installed, and they are ineffective. It says here, I don't know how ineffective, as opposed to where you put them in what windows. May I, before you jump in there, I'll mention you showed the tempera paint, which of course when it rains depending on what the direction of the raindrops are, it might wash off. But another one that's also temporary that I was taught about some years ago was take a bar of soap and make drawings or patterns. And yeah, that's another idea. But yes, what things one might do with inspiring our nature centers to put bird safe glass markings out.
I do think a lot of them are starting to do that.
Hmm.
It's it's a it's an expensive endeavor for a large building, and that's part of it. I think I forget what the price is on some of the stuff, but it can be like $300 for a medium-sized window in a house, and so some of it can get pretty pricey, and so that's a limiting factor for some of these larger buildings. But they are starting. I am seeing it more and more commonly. Windows that are retrofitted. Some of the new buildings that are being built are actually designed with bird safe glass. So there's the technology on this is getting better each year. And there's actually some glass that's made to be bird friendly. So you don't have to put any decals on it, but the glass itself has etchings and reflective UV light um, technology in it.
Yes.
And so it looks like the normal window to us, but the birds can see it. And so some of
Of
the
course,
newer,
the issue is the economics, and
yes,
it would only be if at the municipal level there were rules, incentives, and other um, pressures put on that becomes the norm for new buildings. It's not the case here, and we'll see. Um,
yeah, and that kind of ties into the
lights out.
the legislative. Trying to go back on my slides here real quick. Um, the legislation that Audubon, Washington was working on earlier this year. That was supposed to be kind of the first step into putting some of this into law. Um, what that looks like in the finer details, I don't quite know the details of it, um, but as Elaine alluded to, the best way to make change is to get it into law, and then it's required on new buildings and construction and things like that. And so, um, yeah, it's a slow process sometimes to get through all that. But that's one way. And I also want to address the hot silhouettes that you mentioned. Yeah, to my knowledge, if folks have just like a few different hawk or bird silhouettes on the window, that's not effective at preventing bird collisions. They have to have certain spacing on them, 2 inches apart or so, to be effective. Otherwise, the birds can try and fly through them. And so, yeah, a lot of the stuff we see out there isn't actually effective.
Those thrill-seeking birds that go after hawks. My gosh, what are they thinking? Sammy has written, those of us who are fortunate to travel to eco lodges might consider bringing the dots or something for the lodges to install on their windows. These families are trying to attract birds to their properties for tourists to see, but often there is no window treatments to protect birds. Thought for you to something to put in your luggage. And this is a good one. I think this goes probably to people that are not here at this meeting, but is this kind of information getting to students in urban architecture design and urban architecture and design? Yeah. It's not getting to permit authorities with anything that would compel them to do anything. That's going to have to take the lights out legislature, hopefully next year. But I
Yeah,
guess,
I don't know how much it's getting into the students aspect of it.
well,
I do know it used to be Portland Audubon, Bird Alliance of Oregon now, I believe.
yeah.
Um, they have, I don't know if they still do, but they used to have um, a little packet or um, toolkits for bird windows and bird collisions, specifically speaking to architects. Um, and so I thought that was really cool. I think I linked it to on the Pilchuck website. So they actually had some resources directed to architects. I don't know how many architects saw it or used it, but they've started developing some of that.
Mm-hmm. Um, Diane, DYQ'd me. She has put in, I've heard that birds that strike glass and seem to not be killed and eventually do fly away, some of them do just go away and die somewhere else. Absolutely. Yes. Brian?
Yes, I agree. Yeah. It may look fine or be sit there for a little while, but it may go away. Um,
And
maybe
or they're and
yeah,
or they're the one that the Cooper's Hawk's going to take because it's they're
yeah. It might be concussed and go sit on a tree somewhere and something happens to it later. Yeah, that's absolutely right.
here's a one from Tina. Why are those paracord lines only effective on the outside of the windows? I just returned from lodges in Costa Rica which had paracords on the windows. Maybe why do they have to be outside? Is it
So
because is it because they're waving in the wind or what?
everything I've read is it's to break up the reflection on the window.
Ah, it's
So
not just to make it look as if there's a barrier. It's to actually change the reflection.
the paracord might work on the inside if it has movement to it, I guess. But all the decals and stuff that I've read about, they need to be on the outside because the purpose of them is to break up any reflection of habitat that could be in the window. So if it looks like a window, a tree reflected in the window, you need to break up that reflection.
One topic or one aspect that I don't think we touched much on is people don't like putting things on their windows if it disturbs the view out the window.
Indeed.
And I think there are some there again they're going to be more costly, but ultraviolet paint or something like that.
Yeah, so there are the one I'm familiar with, I think Feather Friendly makes it. It's the company. It's like those dots, but they're now clear, but they're UV dots basically. And so we can't see UV light. So the dots themselves are clear, but they reflect the UV light back. And so the birds can see those dots, but humans can't. So there are some clear grid patterns you can put out there now that we can't see, and so that certainly helps. I think there are UV markers or something like that. I think you are right about that as well.
Uh, our friend Diane says, I've found that just not washing my windows works almost as good as putting stuff on your windows. That's great. Here's one looking at the younger generation. How about art projects for elementary school students? Projects could be put on their windows at home, and in the process, the kids could become educated about the issue, and maybe they will educate their parents.
Yeah, this is a great opportunity to do some education and crafting with students.
We do it.
We do some schools like science days and STEM fairs and things like that, and so we usually have some kind of activity that we do with the kids, and so this could definitely fit into that somehow.
Do any of you have Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts age children? This would be a great Eagle project. Anyone else? I'm going to do the Diane. Well, I've already been doing the Diane not washing my windows.
Well,
Anyone else? Yep.
this is Sammy again. I really want to thank Brian and everyone who came tonight for this very serious topic that was covered in such a clear and calm way and hopeful way.
Thank you, Brian. BZ.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. I appreciate you listening to me talk about birds tonight.